Greetings, Mark Grang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and my guest is Congressman Chris Pappas. Chris?
Good to see you, Mark.
Nice to see you. I have to admit, I have the advantage of watching the debate that George Epstein did this week. So I encourage viewers to watch the debate and then this, because this is kind of like a continuation of seeing that.
Yep.
So one of the areas that I don't think George got to was constituent service. And you know, like the state reps, I mean, our state reps in Conway, I mean, they're all about constituent service. And of course, then they vote on state issues. But really, we look to them for local stuff. And you kind of move up the food chain. And with you, and I will say that you have been, make a lot of visits to the Mount Washington Valley. The last congressman who did that was probably John Sununu, because Carol Shea Porter was a persona non grata for us here. So I guess my general question is about how do you balance your time between constituent service, and what specifically have you done for the North Country, for instance?
Yep. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Sure.
And I think constituent services, it's the most important function in our office. And I think about the days where you're frustrated, you can't get that bill through. You might not be moving in the right direction in committee, but each and every day we've got a team of folks that's dedicated to helping people. And to me, that's why I'm in public service. I came out of family small business, which is where I was working day to day before I got elected to Congress. And I see politics as an opportunity to help people and to make people's lives better. And we can do that in significant ways through our office. So my entire time in Congress, over the last 6 years, we've had someone who has been dedicated to this region of the state. We've got someone on the ground today in a physical office now in North Conway, which is really important for us to be able to...
How do you determine that? Like where to put an office? Because you have, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have 70 towns in your district.
75.
75 towns. So how do you figure that out? Now your family business is a restaurant, so I think you have a special feel for small businesses and service businesses.
Yep.
So how did you determine to put the office here?
Yeah. Well, we wanted geographic balance, and so we've had existing offices in Manchester and in Dover. And while we've had someone living in the Valley who's been dedicated to Carroll County, we felt we needed an official space. And so we were able to find room in our budget to be able to do that. And that's important, to be able to have a meeting spot to welcome the community in, to set up meetings with constituents, and really just to serve as a hub for our outreach efforts in the area. So we take constituent services very seriously. On any given day, folks are reaching out to us about a passport that's expired, about Social Security benefits that they're having trouble accessing, about issues with the VA. And so that's really important for us. We prioritize those interactions, and I think wherever we can lean in and help, it can be a rewarding aspect of this job. And we've returned millions of dollars to the taxpayers of New Hampshire through that work, by helping people navigate federal programs, by helping them with their IRS and tax returns. So those are the kinds of things that we're out there to do.
So you get involved on that level, like individual problems. Someone has a problem with the Social Security checks and stuff.
Yeah, very, very much so. And we encourage people to reach out if we can ever be of any help.
And were you involved with the Berlin? I think you were up in Berlin when the big announcement was. No, you weren't. No, because it's not your district.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
I don't go into Coos County.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, I love Coos County. It's just not the district doesn't include Coos County.
I should have known that. Sorry about that. The debate. I'm reading my notes here, but the debate was interesting, and I think everybody agrees, everybody realizes that most people who are Democrat are going to vote for Democrats. It's like, and there's a small percentage of in the middle, undecided. And then when George was asking, those questions, and he asked a lot of, pretty high concept questions, like what's going on in the Middle East and so forth. And I really felt as though, and I'm not disparaging you, Russell Prescott, your opponent, or George, because you're all very bright and George is a great moderator, but it was like when he asked a question about the Middle East, I felt as though I could walk over in your chair and answer it how you would answer it, and walk over in Russell's chair and answer it how he would answer it. And so it's hard for voters to figure out why someone should vote for you or Russell other than party lines. And I know you talk about your bipartisanship a lot. So maybe if you could talk about that a little bit. And I think you said you've been rated like the 3rd most or 10th most bipartisan person. And so my sense is you probably, and I don't know this, and I tried to Google it and I couldn't
Yep.
find it, is that you probably vote Democratic, like 98% of the time, and maybe the other Democrats vote 99% of the time, but that little bit of deviation makes you much more bipartisan. So talk about this bipartisanship that you're very proud of.
Well, I think it's the only way that you get things done. And in a divided Congress, which we have now, and we're likely to continue to have once the dust settles from the election in one way, shape, or form, that's the only way that you can get bills through, that you can build relationships and actually pass policies that are going to meet the needs of your district. And so that's how we get things done in New Hampshire. We need a lot more of that in Washington. So I have been rated as the third most bipartisan out of 435 members of the House this year.
I mean, is that on a vote count?
It's based on votes, I believe, and also the legislation that we sponsor. And so 80% of the bills that I introduce are co-written and co-led with a member from across the aisle because we know that makes for better policy and you have a better shot of getting that bill through. And we've passed some I think important initiatives this Congress into law, including a bill to raise the standard of living for our veterans that are on disability benefits, passed a bill through the House about access to capital for rural businesses, all done in a bipartisan way. And in terms of the votes, there are members across the aisle in the Republican Party that I vote with a great deal. I would say a number of them that I vote with a majority of the time. I think of folks like Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, who I'm a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus with. We work on water quality issues together. But there are lots of opportunities to demonstrate that independence. And for me, this is about taking cues from the people of New Hampshire and making sure that we're addressing their interests first. There, I think, is a default for some in politics where you just fall in line with the party. And while there are votes that I take with members of my party, I've shown that I'm among the top 10 or so in the House that break ranks and
what would be an
put the
example of
people
how
of the
you've
state
broken?
first.
I'm sorry. What would be an example of things you've broken ranks with?
Yeah, well, a vote last year on the DC crime code where they were trying to move in a direction that wasn't creating the right conditions for public safety in the District of Columbia. The Biden administration has brought forward a number of regulations that I don't think make sense for the state of New Hampshire, including around nursing homes. And so we've worked on a bipartisan basis to try to protect nursing home beds in New Hampshire. So those are a couple examples, but whether it's through voting, through sponsoring bills, signing letters, speaking out publicly, I'm willing to do what's in the best interest of the constituents here, and I think that's the bottom line.
Well, I mean, what are going to be your priorities, and what committees are you on now, but what are going to be your priorities should you get elected this time?
I serve on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Small Business Committee. So I have 3 assignments right now. And they're all very important committees to how New Hampshire functions. When you think about the infrastructure law that we got done 3 years ago, continues to make the kind of investments in roads, bridges, wastewater, broadband that are going to help New Hampshire move forward and ensure that our state is connected. On veterans, we've worked a lot on maintaining VA care, including preventing the closure of the community-based clinic that VA has in Conway. That was proposed a couple years ago, and we've added in other community-based providers that have been a terrific development for veterans, implementing the PACT Act for those exposed to toxic substances. And on small business, we've done work around workforce development, access to capital, the kinds of challenges that I hear about, especially here in the Valley. So moving forward, I think we've got to have an agenda that focuses on lowering costs at a time where inflation continues to see that prices are too high for families and businesses. We've got to be smart about how we have a tax code that's fair and that works for working families and small businesses, that we're addressing the issue of the lack of housing stock in New Hampshire, which has driven up prices, and make sure that we're solving the child care crisis in our state. A number of providers here in the Valley that are under tremendous financial strain. They don't have enough slots open, but they can't turn around and charge their families more. And I think there should be a federal role in helping our providers and our families afford child care that would strengthen our workforce and also lower costs.
I mean, those things, or a lot of those things, cost money, of course.
Yep.
And certainly in the last 10 years, the Republicans always said that the Democrats were the ones, the spenders, the spendthrifts, and obviously that's not the same. That's not true anymore. I mean, the Republicans under Trump spend as much as Biden has. So all those things and things that Harris talked about, they cost money. And when George asked you and Russell, I mean, you both said, we got to control the deficit at some point. Mm-hmm. So like, I mean, you're only one person. Russell would only be one person. Like, literally, what can someone like you do in Congress to control that? And how do you even see it beyond your particular specific vote? How do you even see, like, where's the problem with the spending? Where does it have to be controlled?
Well, we were able to realize a bipartisan agreement last year that has helped bend the curve with respect to increases in spending. And so that helped with respect to this year, not seeing costs continue to escalate beyond our means. But we have a lot of work to do to get things into balance, and we have a broken process right now. We go from one continuing resolution and threat of a government shutdown to the next. We're likely to face that again at the end of the calendar year, when on December 20th, I think it is, the current appropriations will run out. And so everyone waits till the 11th hour when they can maximize the leverage and then work to strike an agreement. And that just doesn't provide the kind of long-range planning that our country needs, that programs and the ones that people depend on should have. And also it prevents us from being able to make those smart decisions about how to contain costs,
so where
address things like duplication and waste within the federal bureaucracy.
I mean, everybody always says that, though, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing is, like, we're paying a lot on interest now, whatever the percentage, 10% of the whole budget's interest or something. But it's the entitlements, right? And we all know that. It's Social Security, Medicare. Neither Harris or Trump are addressing those seriously, or have said they are. But I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, would you support, I guess, working the tables a little bit to, have people pay more on their, Medicare participation? Like, how do you solve those social services costs?
Yeah. Well, certainly that's a big part of the budget, and those are programs that people are paying into right now, and that seniors have retired with the knowledge that those programs are going to be there for them, and we've got to protect that commitment. And so, I'll give an example. The step that we've taken to try to control costs under Medicare with respect to prescription drugs was talked about for a long time. We finally did it. It was done on a much more modest basis than I would have wanted, but it is going to save $6 billion next year. Let's work to expand that to both save our seniors money and also make sure the program is on a more solid financial footing. I do think we need to get together a bipartisan commission that will bring both parties together and help put solutions on the table. I'm, again, part of a bipartisan caucus in Congress that has a debt and deficit subcommittee. I've sponsored legislation based on those conversations around duplication that literally can save the federal government hundreds of millions of dollars through the budgeting process. And we've got to get serious about this. There was a time back in 2020, 2021, where we needed to be spending to be able to keep our small businesses open and keep our communities strong and safe. Now is the time for us to be having those tough conversations, because the longer we wait, the more that the deficit and interest grows, and the more it crowds out the critical priorities, including those important programs for seniors and other Americans.
The switching gears to immigration, and we could talk about the top level. And I know what you're going to say. The criticism of the Biden administration, they let it loose for 3 years now. They're tightening up. That's what the Republicans say. You're going to say, because I heard you say it on the debate, about how there was legislation from Senator Langford, and it's bipartisan, and Trump trumped it, basically, right? So forget that.
Yep.
But what do you know about the New Hampshire border? And we had a discussion debate with Anita Burrows, Democrat, and Maureen Blanchard, who's challenging her,
Yep.
and Chris McAleer. And she was saying there were 14,000 contacts or apprehensions up north, and she used the word sector. And Anita was saying there was 0 in New Hampshire. What do you know about that?
Yeah. So the Swanton sector, of which we're a part, contains upstate New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So we have a smaller piece of that, overall sector in terms of our border with Canada. And we have seen a significant increase in the sector, largely in the upstate New York area where the illegal crossings are happening. And it's been more in the last year than I think we've seen in the previous 15 years before. So a significant increase in traffic, and I think you're right in terms of the number, 15,000 or so.
But that's in the sector, not New
encounters.
Hampshire.
In the sector, the numbers for New Hampshire, I don't know that we have the best numbers possible, but we've been briefed by law enforcement regularly on this. And what they tell us is, along the border in New Hampshire, we need better technology. I mean, we have whole swaths of the North Country that aren't covered by cell phones and the radios, and we need to make sure that that technology is there to provide the communication that would be appropriate. I've introduced bipartisan legislation that looks to create a center of coordination somewhere along our northern border, hopefully right here in this sector, that will allow for training of law enforcement, sharing of best practices, and an ability to better enforce the plan that we have with respect to our northern border. So there are a lot of challenges there. One of the challenges is we've seen the sort of switch from the Customs and Border Patrol along our northern border that have been deployed to the southern border. We need to make sure that we're not missing a beat here, and so we've been pushing for better investments so that we can get adequate staffing and an increased law enforcement presence, because I think it's needed.
What did you think about Governor Sununu sending, I guess it was $1.5 million when he sent the National Guard up there, and it was kind of roundly criticized because some Democrats were saying, well, there's no problem up there. What did you think of Governor Sununu doing that?
Well, I don't think that, I think this is a federal problem that we should be finding a federal solution for. So I appreciate that the governor has assessed that there's a vulnerability there, and I agree with that. But I do think that we need to work to beef up Customs and Border Protection, give them the most modern technology possible, and allow them to cooperate with law enforcement.
I'm going to switch gears again.
Okay.
Someone, and this is a little bit partisan on my part, but someone emailed me and said last night and said that, and I didn't know this, that's why I Googled it. They said, well, you know, all the lawsuits against Trump, Stormy Daniels, and the sexual assault one that he had in New York, that had exceeded the statute of limitations, you know, done. And I hadn't heard that. So I Googled it, you know, 5 different things. It turns out that it didn't exceed the statute of limitations because some of the weird things, like one of them had a 5-year statute of limitations, but because of COVID, it got extended like 18 months so they could sneak in that lawsuit. So I guess what I'm asking is that, what do you think that the I don't want to use the word, what do you think is the thing that's most misrepresented by the Republicans about the Democratic Party? Either a policy?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I feel like I'm my own kind of Democrat. We have our own brand in terms of what we believe and the kind of work that I've been doing in Washington. And so I think having a level of independence is important. But look, I mean, I think some of the attacks around immigration right now don't do the issue justice when we've got bipartisan legislation that we should be working on and passing in Congress. So, you know, I'm frustrated, I guess, with the level of politics that's being played with that issue, you know, attacking Democrats on the airwaves over it when we're at the table, and everyone should be, to try to bring a resolution to border security legislation, making investments, protecting our border, you know, crossings with the most modern technology to interdict fentanyl, making sure we're reforming our asylum system. Those are the kinds of steps that can make a difference and that I would absolutely support. Now,
how do you, I mean, obviously most Democrats are going to vote for Democrats, vice versa. So you're really we're talking now to the, if there are any, right? And I think we all realize there are, the swing voters, the undecided voters, whatever you want to call them. So how do you, you know, when George was moderating your debate, I mean, you had your views, Russell had his views, mostly representing your respective parties. But how do you want to present yourself to the swing voters and undecided? Like, how do you convince them to vote for you?
Well, look, I've been out there doing the work, and we have moved a number of important initiatives for New Hampshire on a bipartisan basis, including investments in our infrastructure, meeting the needs of our veterans and small businesses. And this is work that I want to continue, and I draw on my own experiences as a small business owner in this state. And I understand what's special about New Hampshire. I think we're a state where we can come together and solve problems. We need the same sort of leadership in Washington. So I've been frustrated over the last 2 years in particular as Republicans have controlled Congress. It's resulted in what is rated as one of the least productive Congresses in our nation's history, a lot of extremism and infighting. but not a lot of work being done on the issues that people care the most about. And so we need an agenda that's focused on how we can lower costs, invest in the middle class, have a fair tax code, protect our environment, and also stand up for personal freedoms, including a woman's right to choose. And I think that that is an issue that continues to be on the ballot. We've seen the damage that the Dobbs decision has done across the country, and I'm the only candidate in this race that will fight to be a champion of reproductive freedom and restore Roe v. Wade.
Is that going to be the issue, do you think, nationally? The abortion, pro-life, pro-choice?
I don't think it's the singular issue, but it's a motivating issue for a lot of folks that I meet with. I was with a group just yesterday in Exeter of folks who are going to be voting on that issue and understand the choice in this race and certainly in the presidential race too. So I think a lot of folks will be turning out as a result of what's an unprecedented rollback of a right that was in place for nearly half a century in this country. And we've got to get back to a place where people are in the driver's seat of their own healthcare decisions and not the politicians.
When you, and you know, in Georgia, they went through all like kind of the big issues, like the Ukraine, right?
Yep.
And I know the Democrats supporting Ukraine and most Republicans, but there does seem to be a little pushback on the Republicans saying maybe we shouldn't fund it as much or whatever. And Trump is involved with that. But can you tell us anything, I guess I'm asking you, can you tell us anything that the public wouldn't know about Ukraine that may help people decide whether they want to support Ukraine? Like, what kind of inside information do you have with these kind of issues? And I guess it's specifically about Ukraine.
Yeah, certainly sometimes we get classified briefings on the war in Ukraine and what's transpiring. And I've been encouraged by the fact that we've got more than 300 members of the House that came together to support security legislation that provided some critical help to Ukraine to continue this fight. And I think they've shown incredible resiliency. And I do think that's the big takeaway, because initially when Russia was arraying troops and weaponry along the Ukrainian border, it was predicted that within 24 to 48 hours, the capital of Kyiv would fall and Russia would just roll across the country. And that didn't happen. And they're still showing that resolve. Even today, even at their darkest moments when innocent civilians are being killed and missiles are raining down on civilian areas, they're showing great resolve. And I do think that the United States has a leading role to continue to play, to continue to make sure our allies are assembled and assisting in that fight.
I mean, do you ever see a point where we would get personally involved? I mean, our country would be involved with boots on the ground? Like, where's the red line for you on that?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't support boots on the ground, and I think that's part of the agreement here is that Ukraine's willing to fight. They're willing to die for their own country. They just need the tools to be able to do that, and that's what our help is giving them.
And what do you think about, I know we're a little bit of a tangent here about Ukraine, but what do you think about the reluctance of the Biden administration from allowing Ukraine to fire the long-range missiles way into Russia?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think if I had one criticism, it was a timidness at the beginning of this war on behalf of the Biden administration, when I believe they should have been making taking every possible step to assist Ukraine, including providing the kinds of planes or helping our allies be able to provide the kind of planes and equipment that they needed to be able to fight back. And I do think that if we're talking about missiles that could hit sites that are directly attacking Ukrainians, then I think that's absolutely appropriate.
You know, when President Joe Biden stepped down, you know, of course, the Republicans have criticized the Democrats and say, look, you were just shielding all that. And I remember reading before the debate, the one that Joe Biden did, which was, he did terribly in, is that Democrats were saying, oh no, we're going to, because Biden done so well in the State of the Union address, he looked on his game, is that this is a trap. You know, the Democrats are saying this is a trap because Biden's going to show Trump how smart he is and how together he is, and it turned out he wasn't. So that led to me to believe is that not very many people knew that Joe Biden was declining. So in your position, you know, in your position, what did you see of President Joe Biden? I mean, did you see the decline? Were they purposely trying to hide his decline? And do you think how much he's in decline right now, actually?
I would say that I was as surprised as most Americans were when they watched that debate and failed to see the Joe Biden we knew show up and prosecute the case against Donald Trump in that debate. And I think the last time I was in the same room as President Biden was during that State of the Union, which was a very high energy appearance where he went back and forth with some hecklers on the Republican side of the aisle and handled himself incredibly well. But I think he made the right decision for the country. And it was an unorthodox way, certainly, of exiting a campaign. But I'm glad he took that step when he did, because I think it provides the opportunity for us to think about a new generation of leadership.
All right, and where we are, I'm just checking my notes here. What is, and now we only got 2 minutes left. So on the Trump-Harris campaign, and I was just reading, which I said to you before we went on air, is that the Trump folks are saying they're cautiously optimistic because the race is tight. I mean, it's tight no matter what. Everybody says it's really tight. And then I read Andy Custer, your colleague, saying that the Democrats are nervously optimistic. Do you have any sense of what's going on? What are the inside Democratic polls telling you?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any inside information, but it feels like people are engaging in this election like they usually do in New Hampshire. And, if you think about 4 years ago, while it was an unprecedented time, the voters of New Hampshire, I think, voted for Joe Biden by about a 7-point margin in New Hampshire. It was his largest overperformance from Hillary Clinton in 2016 of any state in the country. So I think that people here recognize that we're not well served by extremism, by divisive forces, and I think Donald Trump has reflected that during his time in politics. And I think about where I'm sitting. I'm certainly going to work with whichever president occupies the White House when it's in the best interest of New Hampshire. But I do think that a Trump presidency would short-circuit efforts to get people to work together and to do the right thing for the country through the Congress. Because just over the last few years, he's advocated for shutting the government down, defaulting on our debt, not taking up immigration reform. And I think that's had an impact in our ability to actually move forward together.
All right. Chris, a minute left. Do you want to say one more 60 seconds to your potential voters?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate the opportunity to be with you. We make a priority of having a presence in the Mount Washington Valley and in Carroll County, because I think we've got to make sure we're hearing from all areas of the state. And I think in an election like this, it's important for everyone to turn out and participate. And I think New Hampshire is going to get very high participation because people care and understand that we can shape the future. And I know that there are a lot of folks out there that tend to talk down America, try to say our best days are somehow behind us. We have the ability to solve problems. We have the ability to have a functioning economy that's a level playing field and meets the needs of our families. We have the opportunity to continue to support our small business sector and to be a country that's a beacon of hope and democracy for the rest of the world. And I hope we'll find the courage to do that this November. And I'd be honored to continue to serve and do the kind of work that I've been doing to lower costs, to protect personal freedoms, and to ensure that New Hampshire is the best place to call home.
Cool. Chris?
Thanks, Mark.
Nice to see you and good luck.
Good seeing you too.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks.